in this case study, we're going to look at one of my favorite companies in the world, Disney. So I worked for Disney for a couple of years. You may have heard throughout this training that I used to be an individual that really supported startups and then became very proficient in turnarounds internationally. So I did a lot of work in Turkey, in Vietnam, in China, of course, in the US. And so Disney had contacted me and they had a particular problem with what was called at that time Disney English, which was a series of schools that they had opened in China. So they had their flagship location that was starting to struggle, and they wanted me to come in and shore up that location. So when I went in, originally, I think we had something like 5 schools in 2 cities. And by the time I left, only about 2.5 years later, we had over 40 schools in 12 cities. So massive growth. What I want to look at here is obviously from the marketing perspective. What was Disney doing creating schools in China? And what does that have to do with marketing? So a lot of people aren't familiar with the fact that Disney has a publishing wing, and under that publishing wing is an educational wing. So Disney actually has quite a bit of experience with education. You may be familiar with the Disney Leadership Institute or Disney Training Program. So interestingly enough, I'm actually a certified Disney trainer. It's something that Disney's actually quite good at in terms of teaching other people how to do things well, both in a business environment and in an educational setting. And so one of the challenges that Disney was having at this point in time is they were trying to build Shanghai Disneyland, and it had been on hiatus for almost 10 years. They could not get the final approvals to get this building off the ground. And then additionally, Disney is by and large a media company. And you are probably not familiar with the fact that, or not Disney, but China only allows up to 22 foreign films into its market in any given year. And so obviously Disney wanted to be part of this $billion market that they were basically being blocked out of. Another part about China and Chinese business is they only allow, there's restrictions around foreign companies and WOFIs and different wholly foreign-owned organizations. So one of those restrictions is media and entertainment. They don't want a lot of Western influence in the country. So Disney took a hard look and said, how can we get a stronger foothold in China? We need to build political goodwill and relationships, and we want to build a brand and reputation so that the Chinese have the same good feelings and positive feelings towards Disney and Mickey Mouse and all the characters that we know and love in China, just like we do in the US. And so they looked at China and said, oh, well, actually the education sector is fairly unrestricted. It's not too hard to get into education in China versus, for example, media. And so they said, well, we have this education wing. Why don't we build schools in China and start to teach the children English through our Disney characters? And of course, it's Disney, so they didn't just build a shack and start providing services. They did it right. They spent a ton of time. They spent a ton of money. And they built these schools. They built educational curriculum that was excellent. They trained teachers. They built an entire organization around providing really high quality English language lessons to children in China. And the whole purpose here was from a marketing standpoint. They were thinking, well, who do we want to really know and love our products, our characters, our movies going to our parks? Kids, right? Kids are the ones that are super excited. And the excited kid eventually becomes an excited adult, just like we see happen in the US. So that was one angle. It's like, okay, if we can get in with these schools and start building a love for our characters early on, that's going to help us grow in China. And then the second piece was just getting in the door and then allowing them to build relationships with the politicians that they needed to build, the government officials, the business environment. And it was a huge success from this angle. So eventually what happened is Shanghai Disneyland got approved. And so it was moved off the hiatus and it was completed. And so Shanghai Disneyland is a real thing. And then they also got major licensing deals and approval. So out of those 22 approved films per year, they actually started getting sometimes 6, 7, 8 films approved. So almost half of the approved films in China were Disney films because of the relationships that they built just by entering in through this kind of open sector, let's say. It was an entire marketing ploy, right? Again, Disney did it well. They wanted Disney English to be profitable. But for Disney, it didn't matter if Disney English broke even or made money, because if it broke even, if it just paid for itself, it was basically a $0 marketing cost for them to do where the real money comes from, which is parks, entertainment, and licensing. And so, really smart, creative, long term strategy. And this is something that I want executives to think about. It's not just about where are we spending money. Are we putting it into TV? Are we putting it into Facebook? Are we making new collateral? You want to get really creative in your marketing strategy and think, where can we invest now that's going to get us the results that we want 1 to 2 years from now? And it can be in these really creative fashions. And the other thing to keep in mind here is that the $0 cost. If I can run a marketing campaign that at the end of the day costs me $0, so I break even on it, that's still a great campaign, because where do most customers come from? Where do most patients come from? A lot of it is word of mouth referrals, either within the professional community or within community residents of that area. And so if we can get a $0 patient cost in, or a $0 customer cost, then what happens is if we do a good job, assuming we do a great job, then they're going to tell friends, or they're going to tell professional colleagues. And that's going to drive this word of mouth referral network, which is ultimately what drives success for any scalable organization.